do a couple of role plays, and then answer questions. I'm the type of facilitator that if you have a question as I'm talking, James will let me know, and I'll be happy to answer it as we are talking through things. So don't hesitate to raise your hand or type something in the chat to say, hey, I want one more question. Basically, we're going to learn how to open a can of worms tonight, okay? So what is a difficult conversation? It's anything you find difficult to talk about. It's any time we feel vulnerable or our self-esteem is implicated. When stakes are important and outcome is uncertain. And when we care deeply about an issue or the people involved. And I've got a little cartoon here of a church council. And someone saying, I think the church council needs a conflict management plan. Someone says, rubbish. Another, that's a great idea. And another, oh, what would you know, you silly old fool. Leave him alone, you dictator. Could someone, and I need to move my, there we go. Could we talk about something else? So our first poll tonight is, have you ever had a difficult conversation? Was it personal, professional, congregational, or all of the above? And for those of you that have groups among you, take a poll among yourselves and choose the answer for the majority of the group. James, do I have to probably unshare my screen? There you go. So there's our first poll. And once we have, so we've all had a difficult conversation. Some were personal, some were professional, and oh my goodness, none of them were congregational. Oh well, all of the above. I guess that answers all of them. And it looks like maybe one more group is answering. Okay. All right. So that was an experiment. We'll keep going. We'll go back to the presentation here. So we've all had something in our lives where we've had a difficult conversation. So let's talk about the common mistakes in a difficult conversation. Oftentimes we fall into the combat mentality. This means there's a winner and a loser. It means that we have high stakes. We think the other person's an enemy, that we have to be right, and that the person needs to be defeated. Another mistake is we oversimplify the problem. We look at it as not having worth, not having the complexity of being in a human relationship, and say, oh, that person's just being silly, or they don't really understand what's going on. So we try to oversimplify the problem. We have no respect. This means not only for the other person, but also for the problem itself. When we are in a difficult conversation, it requires time. So sometimes we don't feel that it's worth our time, it's worth our energy, and that is a form of having no respect. And it's actually a two-way street, not a one-way street, as Henry Rollins says. We tend to lash out or shut down. So we either get more combative or we walk away and don't even engage, when what we really want to do is move to the middle and try to find a way to have that conversation and be respectful. We react to thwarting ploys. So this one's about cats and whether they want to get a specialized menu to get onto the ark or not. But we've seen them in our congregations, right? We can have a conversation about amendments of the bylaws, and people can be completely upset about the treasurer becoming a board member, when really that's not what the problem is it might be something completely different. And so we need to be aware of what people are actually concerned about. We can get hooked. We might have a personal history or a personal tie to an issue or a problem or even an area of the church. And if that's threatened, then we can feel hooked by that. And that wonderful voice in our head where we rehearse the conversation. We are so good at having a conversation all the way to the end with the other person and not even seeing the other person at all. So we that tendency to rehearse and knowing what the other person's going to say and coming to the conclusion of how they're going to react. And then using that rehearsal to make assumptions and fuel that rehearsal. So instead of assuming, we can always ask. And of course, this all makes us lose sight of the goal, which is really to stay in relationship with each other and come back into covenant and learn how we can handle conflict and be in relationship as well. So let's talk about styles of response. So we can use different ways of responding to conflict, and I want you to think about what your style might be as I go through these. And again, we'll try that poll at the end of this one to say, to have you indicate which one you think you are, and if you're a group, poll amongst yourselves to see what the most common answer is. So the first style is to persuade. We try to convince the other party, invite them into an agreement with us. We think that they need to share our own answer, and that we just need to convince them that that's what it needs to happen. We compel people. We put constraints on something that they want, something that we want them to do. We have a sense of authority and responsibility, and sometimes there's a lack of resources or an understanding that there's a lack of resources, so we're compelling somebody to do something. One of the issues with compelling is that it doesn't work very well without enforcement, and I'm not sure how many congregations have a lot of enforcement in them. And we have the wonderful avoidance. A lot of us can jump into this category. We just walk away, abandon the field, and leave the outcome to others who stay with it. We can see issues as trivial, that the relationships or issues are not things that matter. And we can also see it that we might not have the resources to handle the issue at the moment, so we'll just walk away. Another way is to accommodate, to yield your own interests to the other person's needs and point of view, and deem them as having the more appropriate response. And what that does, though, is it invalidates your own experience, and it doesn't keep in that relationship with each other, because then you don't have a place in it. Another way is collaborate. We can respond to conflict through collaboration. The reason why we often don't is because it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, but it is a valid response to conflict. We can negotiate. Negotiation seeks a trade-off, so somebody has to, or both parties need to win some and lose some. We have to come to a mutual agreement on what we're willing to compromise. And sometimes when we do that, we can be seen as a sellout, that we didn't hold our position, that we gave up too much. And we can be supportive in a conflict. This aims to empower the other person to resolve the problem, uses active listening, and it's appropriate when someone seeks your help or you're in a situation where the tension doesn't relate to the issue at hand. And support is what we're trying to move towards with these difficult conversations, so that way you can find a way to be in relationship together and come to a mutual understanding of where you might be. So we're going to try to do another poll, I want you to think about your response style, and for groups, again, talk amongst yourselves and respond with the most common answer. And I will switch to the other screen.
Can everybody see the poll?
Okay, so it looks like we have people that believe that they are avoiders, accommodators, a collaborator, negotiator, and a support. We'll send out a packet of information that you'll get from this webinar, and you'll have a web link to go see what you might test as and see what it actually is. So just think about that.
Laura Bev shares that she thinks her style is very different according to her role.
And of course, that's going to be the case, especially if you're in your home with your family, or you're in the congregation, either as a minister or as a lay leader. Those roles will switch according to where you are and what you're doing. Okay. So let's talk about working on your response. And I think this is the most important work in a difficult conversation, because oftentimes if we don't sit down and actually analyze and reflect on where we're coming from, then we're walking into it and likely to be triggered again, likely to have emotions flare, and not really get any place in the conversation. So we really need to step back and reflect on where we are. So we need to look at, what purpose do we have in this congregation? What is our goal? What is our outcome? What do we hope to accomplish? We need to watch for hidden purposes. You may think that you have honorable goals, like educating an employee or increasing a connection with your team, but your words might be condescending or judgmental. So you want to think about what your purposes are, and if they're more useful to you or to others, and enter the conversation with a purpose that is supportive for all involved. We need to think about what assumptions we carry with us into the conversation. Are you making assumptions about the other person, about what their needs are, what their feelings are, what they saw, what they might feel? So understanding where your assumptions are in the conversation. What buttons do you have that have been pushed? What's in your personal history that has come up? What emotions are being triggered? Think of all those. I heard one person tell me one time, I have to step back and think, what buttons have I actually put out to be pushed? So even asking that question. What's your attitude toward the conversation? Do you think it's going to be difficult? Do you think the other person's going to be angry? Do you think it's going to be horribly difficult? Or do you think, well, you know what? This might be a learning opportunity for me. I might be able to learn something. I might be able to find out their story. Your attitude makes a big difference. Do you view the other person as an opponent? Are they somebody to be beaten? Are they somebody to be up against in a fight? Or are they someone who's a partner that you're in a relationship with, whether it be in the congregation, in your work, or your personal life? Stepping back and noticing what your needs and fears are. And this is important because sometimes those needs and fears are very real. And so taking steps to make sure that you can have the conversation in a safe way is important. So bringing in a third party that can hold that safe space in a neutral way is a perfectly acceptable way to make sure those needs and fears are met. You might just look and see what those needs and fears are, and if they need a safe space, or if you're able to just recognize them and understand, I need to be aware of these while going into this conversation. And finally, the good old, what was your contribution to the problem? We always have assumptions and ideas about what the other person has done and how they have made the situation worse, or how their actions have angered or saddened or disheartened us. But what exactly might you have done in the situation, and reflecting on that is important. So beginning the conversation, and this can be the hardest part, actually stepping up and inviting the person to the conversation. So possible conversation openers. I've something I'd like to discuss with you that I think will help us work together more effectively. I'd like to talk about the committee meeting with you that we were at the other night, but first I want to get your point of view. I need your help on what just happened. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Or I think we have a different perception about that finance sheet that was handed out. I'd like to hear your thinking on this. Or I'd like to see if we might reach a better understanding about that job that we worked on together. I really want to hear your feelings about this and share my perspective as well. So take a moment and think of your own conversation opener. And in a group, maybe designate one person to do this. And think about how you might invite somebody to a conversation. And once you have that, type it into the chat box. I see some laughing in some of those groups. So how might you invite somebody to the conversation? So Shasta says, I'd like to talk with you about something I need help understanding.
Laura, why don't I unmute folks one at a time and let them chime in here?
That would be great.
So Bev, do you have a favorite opening?
I generally start either with a I'm wondering about or I'm confused about. Trying not to make it sound like I've already made a judgment, and leaving it really open-ended.
Wonderful, thanks. Stefan and the other folks at Davis, among yourselves, do you have some favorite responses?
We liked the one that was shared in the chat, but sort of the idea of I just saying I have something I'd like to talk about, and do you have time to sit with me?
What about the folks at Wolf?
What did we say?
Can you help me understand?
Can you help me understand where you're whatever, but making it clear that you really want to understand where they're coming from.
And Kent, how about you? Do you have a favorite strategy?
Sure. I would say part of the either can you help me or I think I don't understand something. I also think it's important to ask if someone has time, because you don't want to spring these conversations when someone's walking out the door.
Excellent point.
Good point, Kit. One of the other things to be aware of is oftentimes people get defensive if you aren't specific about what you want to talk about. So if you start with, I just want to talk to you about something, then they're going to go, whoa, wait, what are we going to talk about? So making sure that you actually give just a kind of a synopsis of very simple sentence. I want to talk about that finance committee meeting, or something that gives them a little bit more specificity to what your conversation needs to be about. Okay. So one more tip before starting the conversation: you need to make sure you have tools to help you stay grounded during the conversation. Take the time to breathe and remain calm. It's perfectly okay to acknowledge feelings, to state them. Make sure you're doing the I statements, and we'll cover that here in a minute. To even take the time to say, I think we're both getting a little bit emotional. Maybe we need to just step up and go take a 1-minute walk around. So make sure that you have tools to stay grounded in the conversation, and that you've gotten plenty of sleep, you've eaten, all of those wonderful self-care kind of things. So finally, we're getting to the difficult conversation. The first step is to make sure that you enter it with curiosity and inquiry. You want to cultivate an attitude of discovery and curiosity. You want to make sure the person, you want to learn about the person's story. You don't know what they perceived, and you don't know how they're feeling. You might have some assumptions and some ideas, but you really don't. So curiosity. Pretend you don't know anything. Try to learn as much as possible from your partner's point of view. Some of the tips are: think of them as an alien from another planet. That might be going too far, but think of them as somebody that you don't know. You might have somebody that's really close to you. Think you know everything that's going on in their life, and you might not know. They might be having something that you're completely unaware of. So really try to learn and be curious. Watch their body language. What is the person saying with their body and not saying out loud? Being aware of that. Be very curious. And in this first step, you really want the person to just be able to talk and share their story until they're finished. It's going to be hard not to interrupt. It's going to be hard to just listen. I think one of the important things we need to realize that by listening to the other person's story doesn't mean we agree, doesn't mean we accept their version. It just means that we're learning and we're trying to understand. So don't take it personally. Check your reactions and make sure you're grounding yourself.
So, Laura, Shasta is asking a question of what happens when they won't stop talking.
Good question. If they don't stop talking, maybe if you know that going into the conversation, one of the things that you can do is set a time limit. And it's sometimes good to prepare the person, so asking them to reflect on some questions and what their goal might be in the conversation beforehand. So that way they come in with that kind of already prepared reflection instead of being thrown off in the conversation. And setting a time limit, don't trust your watch or the clock or anything like that. Actually have a physical timer of some sort that sits there and counts down the time. So that way the person, you're not having to tell the person, hey, it's time. There's an actual other entity that is doing that for you. There's always the option of also bringing in a neutral person. You don't have to do these things on your own. You can bring in a neutral person that can be that timekeeper as well. Looks like we have something else.
Shasta simply said, thank you.
Okay. So step 2 is acknowledging. And again, acknowledgement doesn't mean agreement, but it shows you heard and understood. You explain back what you heard the person say. My favorite saying is, I heard you say this and this and this. You kind of guess at their hopes and try to honor their position. If you are getting defensive and trying to state back what their story might be, acknowledge that. It's perfectly okay to say, I notice I'm becoming defensive, and I think it's because of this. And so I need to just breathe a moment, and then I'll continue to say back what I heard you say. Again, acknowledgement does not mean agreement. So it's important in acknowledgement to have active listening techniques. This means that the person feels validated, they know that you heard them, and some of the techniques for doing that are listed here, such as encouraging the person, can you tell me more, help me understand, validating, I appreciate your willingness to resolve this matter, it's acknowledging the worthiness of the other person, restating, so would you like to be informed when the calendar change? So you would like to be informed when the calendar changes, correct? So just try to restate what they're talking about, what their feelings might be. You seem very upset, you seem sad, you seem angry, you seem whatever it might look like to you, so that way they can correct you if you're wrong, and you can learn a little bit more. Clarifying, it sounds like you're angry about not being informed. Again, giving that opportunity for the person to tell you a little bit more about their story. And finally, summarizing. These seem to be the key ideas you've expressed. Oftentimes, in a difficult conversation, the biggest hurdles are understanding where you're coming from, and then also helping the other person know that you have heard their story, that they feel validated, and that they know that you've heard them and what they have to say. And then oftentimes I find that in sharing stories, it's usually just a miscommunication or a misunderstanding or assumptions that we have brought to the table about each other that has gotten us into this place. So the next step is sharing your story. Once the person has shared their story, and you can start seeing, okay, so what perspective did the other person miss that you have, and that you can fill in. You want to make sure you're clarifying without minimizing. Remember, keeping that respect, keeping that understanding that you want to respect their worth and dignity, and you want them to do that for you. Using I statements. When you are able to talk about something from your own experience and your own feelings, and use I statements such as, I heard you say you were upset when I did not support your idea at the committee meeting last night. I felt sad and left out when your idea did not take into consider my financial situation. So I statements really help you feel validated yourself in your own experience, but also doesn't put blame on the other person and cause them to get defensive. So it helps you speak from your own experience and your feelings. So by then, both of you have shared your stories. You've filled in the blanks. You've tried to reach a clarifying idea of what actually happened. And you can move to building a solution. Brainstorm ideas and solutions. And I think the key thing that we always have to remember in brainstorming is that it's brainstorming. Let the ideas flow. Even if they are the most off-the-wall ideas, it doesn't mean you agree with them. It just means if the person is allowed and you're allowed to throw things out there, then usually once they're all thrown out there, you can go back through and say, okay, what's actually going to work here in how we go forward? Ask the partner what might work. Look at all the ideas. Find something about the idea that the person has suggested and build on it. So it doesn't mean you have to agree on the whole thing, but maybe there's something in the solution, in the what they proposed that you can build on. If a person goes back to that adversarial role, then go back to curiosity. It looks like you're getting upset. Did I miss something? Can you help me understand what's going on here? Going back, trying to learn the story, trying to learn the understanding of what's going on. So any questions about those tips or those steps that we went through? And we're going to practice a little bit of those. Okay. Some helpful tips to remember. The successful outcome of the conversation really depends on how you are and what you say. If you're grounded, if you've done the reflection work, if you are using your I statements, then the ability to have a successful outcome is higher. Acknowledging your emotional energy and the emotional energy of the other person. Oftentimes we get caught up in these conversations and we let the energies rule the conversation, or the emotional energy rule the conversation, instead of actually saying to ourselves, oh, you know what, I can feel myself turning red and getting angry and my fists are starting to clench. So it looks like I might need to take a breath and step away. And it's okay to acknowledge that. It's okay to say, you know what, the tension's getting really high. Let's take a couple minutes just to stop talking and set the timer for 2 minutes to just breathe. Again, don't take attacks personally. I know that's hard to do, especially if we get hooked or if we have a personal stake in it. But honestly, most of the time when people are feeling that they need to attack, there's something else going on, and there's something in their story that's informing them to be in that space. Don't assume that your partner can see your point of view. Oftentimes we think that, well, this person's known me for 15 years. They know where I stand on these things, so they should know my point of view. And that's not always the case. I think that all the time with my husband, who we've been married for 23 years and known each other for a lot longer than that, and thinking, oh, he should know what I'm feeling. He should know all of that. But oftentimes, no. You have to stop, and that's where the respect comes in again. Explain your point of view. If you don't explain it, then you've given that the other person the opportunity to explain it for you and to shut down that relationship. Being flexible and curious. Again, changing a conversation from a trying to make a point to a learning opportunity is the best way to go into these conversations. The more that you can be flexible about what that outcome looks like. You might have a goal, but being flexible of how that will actually look, and being curious about the other person, the likelihood of the conversation being a success is high. Now, there are times when we can do all these steps and still not be able to reach an outcome that we can both agree on. And that's just going to happen sometimes. That's humans. But I want to make sure that if you get to that situation, to stop and don't just walk away. State why you're walking away. Explain in your I statements, or as best as you can, why the solutions are not meeting your needs and concerns, and then acknowledge that you understand that you're making the choice to walk away, and you're willing to accept the consequences. Oftentimes we say, well, just throw up our hands and walk away, and well, the other person just wouldn't agree with me, so I just had to give up. When in actually walking away, you've had a choice on whether to engage or disengage, and just keeping that in mind. So let's try a role play. And we're going to go at this from the point of view that we're trying to be curious and try to find out what's actually going on. And the scenario is your next door neighbor pounds on your door, and when you open it, he appears to be boiling mad. And sure enough, when he opens his mouth, he says, "I'm so mad at you, I could spit nails." So using curiosity, try to discover what he is angry about. And I'll stop sharing here for a minute and let's see. Is there, let's see. Why don't we have Bev? So what would you do, Bev, if your neighbor comes knocking on your door and starts pounding on it and tells you he's spitting mad? How would you try to learn what's going on?
I'd ask him to tell me what's up.
Okay. So James, you want to be the angry neighbor and see if Bev can find out what's wrong?
Unless it's my neighbor who owns guns.
Sure, I can be the angry neighbor.
Okay, so Bev, find out why James is angry.
What's up, James? You look really upset.
My newspaper is missing again, and you've taken it for the third time.
Your newspaper. What
My copy
makes
of
you
the
think-
National Enquirer, it is gone again, and I know you took it, Bev.
I'm really confused, James. What makes you think I took your newspaper?
It's missing. It is just gone, and you're the only one who sees it there in the morning. It must have been you. It couldn't have been anybody else.
Is there no other possibility? I can tell you I didn't take your newspaper, but I can see how upsetting this is. I wonder
Really upsetting.
who else may have taken it. I wonder what other solution there might have been to the missing newspaper.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was you.
Well, I'd really like to help you find out what's happening to your newspaper. I can tell you it's not me. I don't read that newspaper. I quite honestly don't have any interest in reading newspapers right now.
Okay.
I could see that.
So let's take a moment. So we're trying to find out what's the problem, what's going on. So did Bev actually find out what's going on with James? Did she find out what the problem is? She found out that his paper was gone, that he saw that she was the only one there in the morning, and so she must have taken it. So she used questions, she used curiosity, she restated, it sounded like you were angry. Those are all good ideas. The next one we're gonna do is we're going to imagine that we are in a finance meeting or a fundraising meeting. And I've just suggested that I want to do a fundraiser where all members and friends of the congregation that are active have to contribute $100 to purchase something individually. And somebody else in the room gets quite angry and stands up and storms out. And it's actually somebody that I knew quite well on the committee, but I just can't understand what happened. So we want to find out what her story is, and we want to find out, we want to validate what her story is. So 2 goals. You're going to go into it with curiosity, and we're going to go into it trying to understand as well as validate what her experience was. Okay? So story and validation. And let's see. How about
Laura, could I suggest that the folks in Davis and the folks at Wolf that they could do this in their own groups?
that? Would be great.
Would that be okay?
That would be fine. Mm-hmm.
And we could have let's see, will that work? If you guys stay muted, that'll work.
So the idea is to find out why the person left the meeting and validate the experience. So whoever is the person that left the meeting needs to come up with a reason why the person left, and the other person needs to find out what that reason is and validate it. Everybody got an understanding of that? So the two groups can do that. And Shasta, why don't you try to find out why I stormed out of the meeting?
Okay. Am I unmuted?
You are.
Okay, good. Okay, wow. You must be feeling some pretty strong emotions because you left very quickly. I wonder if you can talk to me about what was going on with you.
Well, you suggested something that was just outrageous. I couldn't support it.
Oh, wow. I really don't know what it was that made you feel that way. Can you help me understand what was going on?
Well, you made this whole idea of everybody having to contribute $100. $100. Do you know how much $100 is?
Wow, it sounds like that $100 was an issue. It was hard for you to think about that much. Is that kind of what was going on with you?
Yeah, and I couldn't understand why you would do that, knowing my situation and not really taking into consideration the financial situation that I've been in.
Wow, it sounds like you feel like it would have been better if we would have checked in with people to see if they were able to do that before assuming that that's what should happen. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. But you know me, so why? I don't understand why you didn't understand that I could be angry about such a suggestion.
So what I'm hearing you say is that I should have realized that you might have been angry because I know you so well, and that was part of what made you angry.
Great, good job.
Okay, that wasn't as easy as it sounds. So
it's really
thank you.
Thank you for participating.
Can we call the Davis folks back?
And the Wolf folks, are they back too?
I think the Wolf folks are back.
Okay. So at this point, it's just questions. What questions might you have? I'll put up a screen with resources, and like I said, we'll put together a packet, a PDF that will be sent out to everybody with those resources and some of the things that I've gone over, because I didn't put all the explanation of everything on there. I just put key words and explained it, so you will get that information. But what questions do you have?
For everyone is wrapped up business.
Oh, everybody's unmuted.
Let me mute all. Okay, but if anyone has a question and would like to unmute themselves, you can do that.
Okay, I'm going to go first. This is Shasta, and what I noticed was that if I wasn't careful, I found myself coming up with sort of closed questions where the answer was going to be either yes or no, and that wasn't a position I wanted to put myself or the other person in. So I realized I need to practice open-ended questions a little more. And if you have suggestions about that, that'd be great.
So one of the important things to know about going into the conversations are to kind of have a goal in mind, but don't have set ways you want the other person to answer. So kind of letting go of that. Open-ended questions, sitting down and making a list. I really like the one, can you tell me more? That works a lot. Just tell me more. And you can keep saying that. I've said that, I don't know, in a conversation maybe 3 or 4 times, and just because you're trying to get that understanding. And you can keep saying that. Another way is, I heard you say this, is that correct? Just going back to the person's story and trying to get clarification about what you heard. and trying to understand it. And we try to go through these conversations because we've got emotion tied up into them. So we're trying to speed through them sometimes. It's perfectly okay to slow down the conversation and say, you know what, give me just a moment. I'm trying to form the question that I need at this moment. So that way I can help you tell me a little bit more, as well as try to understand what I'm trying to clarify with you.
Other questions from the group? How about the good folks down in Davis? Any questions from your group?
We said that we were enjoying ourselves and it was good to practice, and we all have something to learn.
So, Laura, I have a question for you.
Yes.
How often have you seen a difficult conversation go well by email?
Never. There are so many assumptions done in email. You cannot tell a person's inflection of their voice. I don't know how many times emails have blown up when somebody has been joking in what they've said, but then the person who reads it sees it as a threat. I have an example from my own congregation. Somebody said, well, we need to go and it's somebody from the military, so we need to go and bomb that person and get their opinions in our own way. And another person saw that as a real threat and didn't know how to take it. So the only thing you can use email for in this situation is to set the time and date of the conversation. Don't try to have it through the email. Don't try to even, you could also send questions for people to ponder. Sometimes people, when they get the opportunity to reflect beforehand, the conversation can go a little bit better, but don't try to have them answer you through the email or give that to you ahead of time. Yeah.
I wonder from all the participants, how often members of your congregation try to have difficult conversations by email, and what you have done successfully or unsuccessfully to stop that practice.
It looks like we have some questions from Wolf.
I'll answer that to the best of my ability and then ask my question.
Sure.
I'm Sharon, and as far as the emails go, we've tried even sort of banning any kind of emotion-laden or emotion-laden topics from emails, but we haven't been very successful, I wouldn't say. But still, we do catch ourselves better than we used to. So I would say we've become more aware of the problem, and we try to deal with it in a more sensible way. The question I had was, is it ever okay to stop and say, I don't mean stop and, steaming and walking away, but stopping and just saying, can we continue at another time? Is that ever an okay thing, or should you try and stick with it until you get it done?
I think all of those I think that's a perfectly valid request. Sometimes we can see each other getting caught up in the conversation and not being able to hear each other. And we sometimes need that space, right? I don't know how many times I've been in a conversation that I'm still having the stories in my mind going and not really listening, but there's things of the other person's story that I'm catching. And if I step away, I can reflect back, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I understand. And then you can come back together. The point is, if you want to stay in relationship, then don't just walk away, and don't make sure you follow up. So if you're going to say, okay, I think we need to step away right now, take the time to find out when you can talk again. So that way the parties involved can prepare on that, and then actually mutually agree that they're going to do that before leaving the room.
Would it be appropriate, this is Ruth again, I'm Diane, Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hi. Would it ever be appropriate in a similar situation to ask to bring a third party, such as the minister, in to help with the conversation and maybe bring it further along than you were able to get just the two of you?
Yes, actually, I've played that role a couple different times in my own congregation and other congregations. And the goal is to make sure that the other person feels safe. So pick a neutral person that you both feel safe with that doesn't have a vested interest in either one of you. That's the first step. The other one is that person is there just to help those skills. They're not there to take a side. They're there to say, I don't think that was an I statement. Can you maybe restate that as an I statement? Or can you take a moment and, because sometimes the thing that we most often forget in these conversations are to restate what we just heard the other person say. So often that neutral person in the room can say, can you pause a moment and actually restate what that person said, so that way you can clarify to make sure that that's what they actually said. The person can be a timekeeper. Oftentimes it's just to remind you of the skills that you're trying to use in the conversation, because it's hard to do when you're in that space. And you can get caught up in what you're trying to accomplish, and then also trying to keep to the skills, and sometimes that's hard to hold in the same space.
We're coming to the end of our time together, and one of our goals is to start on time and end on time. I'd like to really thank Laura for her presentation this evening. It was just a lot of really wonderful material. Laura, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to remind all of the participants that we'll be emailing you a list of resources that you can use to learn more about this topic. That will be coming out within the next week or so. There will also be a recording of this webinar online that you'll be able to find at www.uua.org/pwr. That's uua.org/pwr. So if there's other members of your congregation that you think would benefit from this, please direct them towards the recording. We'll also be sending out an evaluation. I really found this useful for myself, and I hope you did too, but we are always looking at ways to improve our webinars. And so I hope you'll fill out that evaluation and send it back to us. Also, I'd like to remind you that we have, Laura is a member of the Pacific Northwest District Healthy Congregations team. And we have 2 more webinars by members of that team coming up in December and January. The next one is on untangling triangles, which is something that happens a lot in our congregations. So I encourage you to check those out and many of our other upcoming webinars. And finally, I'd like to just say to everybody, if you're dealing with a situation in your congregation and you're just feeling stuck, please feel free to reach out to regional staff. We are here for you. We really want to hear from you and help you in any way we can. And I will leave it there. Thank you very much, everybody, for being with us this evening.